It's great to have this episode. I am super stoked. We are revisiting Blackhawk Company, 1st Battalion, 23rd Infantry Regiment. As you know, episode 1 and 2 of our podcast, we talked to Rob, the commander, and Joe, who, of course, was a platoon sergeant, and he also was the author of the exceptional book, Gods of War, which I highly recommend you guys read. And it's a great book, one of the best examples of combat storytelling that I've seen. And the level of detail and the emotion that he captures in it, it is written like someone who really saw it and experienced it. It's not one of those things you see out there that's BS, self-serving. It is not that. This is done for his teammates. And if you don't believe me, read it. And then if you feel otherwise, I'll pay for your book. But you won't feel that way. So I'm pretty cheap and I'm not going to pay people back. So I feel pretty confident. So it's great to have you, Rob and Joe. And then we're also honored to be joined by the First Sergeant. You were retired. Were you a retired Sergeant Major, Swifty?
No, I was retired E8 First Sergeant and Master Sergeant. And yeah, I turned down the academy to do another tour.
Okay. Yep, got it. We're honored to have Swifty, who was the company First Sergeant. He was Rob's right-hand man and a mentor to Joe. And this is a great opportunity for us to talk, to revisit Blackhawk Company and their experience, and to really have a conversation between these three men and really talk about how they observed and interpreted key events in Blackhawk Company's history. And it's just, I look forward to hearing this conversation, especially with Swifty being here, who's going to add a layer that we haven't seen yet with Blackhawk Company. So welcome, Swifty. Great to have you with us today.
I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, sir. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Joe, we'll start with you. So can you talk to us, remind our listeners or the new folks a little bit about kind of the events that led up to Rob assuming command of the company? Now, you talked about it in great detail in the book, but I really want to hear what Rob and Swifty have to say about that and set the stage in terms of your pre-deployment. You guys are getting ready to go out the door downrange. Can you kind of set the stage in terms of the timeline and the events that happened?
Okay. In late February of 2003, we got a brand new company commander. We ended up going to NTC right after that. So beginning of March, we went to NTC. Right after that, we ended up going to JRTC. The only unit that ever went to NTC and JRTC back-to-back rotations. And then when we came back from JRTC, there's a lot of issues that we had seen during the training cycles and a lot of things that had popped up. A lot of the NCOs had lost confidence in our new commander, and we voiced our opinions. Maybe not the right idea, maybe not the way to go, but with combat looming around the corner, we felt like we didn't really have any other opportunity or any choice. Then we, right before we deployed, probably 2 weeks before we deployed, we ended up with Rob. We never even met him, really. We met him for 5 seconds. We went on leave. We came back. We loaded up. We went to war, and nobody knew who he was.
Swifty, when you were observing the company, when you were leading the company at those in the train up leading up to it, what sort of things like most concerns you about the company's performance, about the leadership, that really kind of made you realize that you had a potential problem within the company that needed to be resolved before you guys head out the door?
Before we get down, let's back up a little bit what Joe just said. When I came to the unit, it was probably early 2000. I mean, we were General Chiseki, project, I don't want to call it a project, but all the money was going into training. And when I came in the door, it was all new to me because I came from behind the fence guy, so I didn't know the big army. And they told me big army is a harder challenge than what's behind the fence, and it's very true. It's big army is it's a handful. But I came into a unit there was a lot of Bradley guy, a lot of mixture. There somehow we got a lot of good core, NCO core, that a mixture of maneuver guys from the Bradley guys, light infantry guys, and guys from the regiment. So we had a good foundation. So everybody was an expert on little things, subject matter expert here and there. So we, like Joe said, for about 2 years, we just start meshing your left, your right. We weren't losing anybody. We're actually gaining more people as we were building up for the deployment, as we were building up to Stryker. So we actually had a good core, good foundation, and I enjoyed that because it was new to me and I was learning and learning as I go. It's always learning and putting in my input in the core of stuff I learned in the regiment, behind the fence. And of course, I'm learning all the maneuver stuff. I know nothing about maneuver. And when I walked into the door in the battalion in Tomahawk, I was acting first sergeant for that summer leave. they told me about, hey, first time we need to do a guard mount and all that stuff. I said, what's a guard mount? I don't know what that stuff is. I don't know what, we don't do that stuff, But I had to learn all that stuff. I don't know what a guard mount, I don't know what finance guard is. So I had back then a tanker, 19 kilo guy, a tanker, hey, grab him by the side, say, hey, I got you, Sergeant Swift, and that took care of it. So the concern wasn't there. Just we needed to train up. There was lack of skills, and especially the Bradley guys, death before dismount, and then kind of the attitude. So we were able to mesh real well, and I had a good NCO, good core NCO, a lot of good junior NCOs. One concern I saw with the weakness was that I saw that we can help was our team leader, our junior NCOs, or our senior specialists, our E4. I think we need to focus on those guys because that's the core I was raised in. As a team leader, to me, probably the most important fighter in the infantry world, because he is the only leader in the infantry that is a fighter and a leader at the same time. For everybody else from squad leader on up, we're actually controlling a maneuver. We're not actually, are we shooting and anything like that, but we're not a fighter and a leader. So I think that's why I focus on that team leader course. And fortunately, the sergeant major, the colonel, I think all into it, and we developed a team leader course, and of course, a pre-ranger course work into that, and that really helped out our junior NCO and the soldiers. And the junior soldiers enlisted. They're seeing that and say, hey, this thing's, I want to be a team leader. Because I get to go learn all these new cool things. I think that really helped out. Command climate, I didn't know what that is. Being at E7 at the time, I'm like, I know what it is, but I didn't experience it. But then, like I said, 2 months prior to that, first NTC rotation, we had a first sergeant, but at the time he was getting ready to leave the unit, so he's taking some night college. So when we rolled into NTC, I was just a platoon sergeant, but so I had the responsibility of being an acting first sergeant and a maneuver platoon sergeant at the same time. So I had a double duty, but I accepted that challenge, and I liked it. There was a moment, I think Joe brought up in the book, that we did a exercise, a movement, we got the battalion op order, and we went to this NTC now, the ramp side, Frago to the platoon leaders, and the commander just pretty much recited what the battalion commander put out in the battalion order. I'm like, that's not how it's supposed to be done. So he closed the ramp and drove off, and we all just looked. I was platoon leader, platoon sergeant, and they still to look at each other. I mean, Joe was there too, like, what is going on here? Luckily we had a good XO at the time. Now, being the right hand man, I don't want to make him look bad or anything like that. And I just kind of try to help him out and stuff like that. So that was interesting deployment. Again, the same thing happened at TRTC. Again, first sergeant troops. He was finishing up his college, so I then had more responsibilities as a first sergeant, and also that platoon sergeant. But I said we had a good NCO corps. I kind of let my weapon squad leader took over the platoon because I had that confidence in him. For 2 years I knew that guy and the NCO corps. I had to trust all my NCOs and our soldiers.
I mean, that must have been a real culture shock for an NCO coming out of Ranger Regiment, right? To come into that, because you go from an organization that filters people out at a very high level, right? And you get the best of the best of the best. And now you're going into general purpose forces, even though it's a very good unit. You're going to general purpose forces where you have to pretty much train what you have, right? You're not allowed to select people. And so it must have been a little bit of a culture shock for you to kind of experience some of that dysfunction coming from your background.
And we'll call it dysfunction. It's just like I said, they just ready, like a wet sponge, they're ready to absorb. I think the soldier we got there were ready for. I think the unit, the brigade turned around, did a good job of trying to promote this stuff. And say, hey, we're the tip of the spear of this modernization. They didn't even call us the Stryker brigade back then. Correct me, Rob. I think they called us the medium brigade back then. Brigade. They weren't sure to call us the Stryker or not.
The IBCT, the Interim Brigade Combat Team.
IBCM. Yep.
IBCM. And surprise, 25 years later, Strykers are still in the Army, right?
Yep. So I guess still there. Yeah. But we just interim. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And one caveat too, like one of the things that people don't talk about is that before we had got this new commander, we were pretty much the main effort for everything all the time. Anyhow, the guys were really, really good. Really good. We were always the main effort. Alpha Company, Charlie Company, they were all behind us. And then overnight, it seemed like for the guys on the ground at my level that we were like, man, what happened to us? Like, how could we fall so far so fast?
Mm.
Like, do we suck? Or, I mean, what is going on?
That to me is the most, and again, if you want the details, folks, I'm going to do this throughout, by the book, because Joe goes into great detail about what happened, right? And what you said, Joe, that I guess upset me the most was when you were saying is like a lot of these problems were at the leadership level, and you had these very capable soldiers and NCOs that were looking at each other like, "Are we the problem?" That's like the worst leadership outcome if you make your folks doubt themselves, or you make when they're good, right? Like that's like one of the worst effects you can have as a leader. So I don't know the dude. I don't want to talk about the individual. I guess here's the thing, First Sergeant. I remember when I took command of my company, my first sergeant sat down with me after the ceremony was over, and he closed the door, and we talked about the company for a good couple hours. So what did you tell Rob about what he needed to kind of fix when he came on board? I would love to hear more about that.
Well, we back up with a previous commander, like real briefly. When we came back from JRTC and NTC rotation, we was packing up. We get ready to go. Stryker's already on the railroad. We just picking up, and we went do some more training and catch up some stuff. But somehow the command climate at the time was that they wanted to focus on the family, and I understand that. That's the first time I understand. Family is the backbone of any guy. But everybody deal with it differently. If every family deal with it differently, but the commander wanted to focus on, hey, let's do a family social group, get away and like that. Some guy didn't want to do that. Some guys, they just want to deal with it in their own way. So that was forced more on us than the actual training. Hey, this is stuff our weaknesses and stuff we can work on. Maybe we don't have the equipment here, but we still can train. We still can do stuff, and get, instead of focus on that. So then. And then at the time, and I told Joe about this, when we came back, and I saw that at the environment, I saw the morale was getting low. I see that the soldier didn't have the confidence and trust in the command. And then I said, hey, hey, being the senior NCO, I see that, and I like, hey, is it us? Is it the NCO? And I know it's not us, it's not the soldier or the NCO. It's our commander. I think he's the issue. So I went directly to. One in the morning, we're going in PT, went to the brigade headquarters. I stuck my head in there to Brigade Sergeant Major at the time, Sergeant Major Jeff Dew, good friend of mine, personal, still one of my best friend. And I stuck my head, I said, Sergeant Major, he said, what's up, Swifty? He said, hey, and I just give him the, out what we feeling there down at the company. Well, he said, hey, keep me tap on it. So like that, And I said, Joe didn't know about this, but then later on, him and the NCO went in there and talked to the Sergeant Major at the time. And that's when I got the phone call. And also for that, during that 2 week when we came back, now as the company commander and first sergeant, we did that morning formation, the reporting, and a lot of morning he's not there, and then now we got a new battalion commander, Colonel James, who was my company commander in the Ranger Regiment at the time. So Buck James, me and him go back to his younger days as a captain. He would call me on the phone, hey, first sergeant, where's Blackhawk 6? I said, at first couple of times I covered for him. Hey, I think he's out running, sir, something like that. But I knew better because the CEO called me and said, hey, Swifty, I'm taking my daughter to school. I want to take my, I said, to inside and say, hey, how come he's able to do that but not the soldier? Soldier's here in the morning doing PT with, what he's supposed to do, but he's, taking advantage of that. Hey, I want, we only got a few weeks left. I want to take my daughter to school and stuff like that. I'm like, fishing, and then one morning, I think that third or fourth time, again, Tomahawk 6, Colonel James called. I said, hey, first sergeant, can you have Blackhawk 6 come here? And and I had told him, sir, Blackhawk 6 said, he's not here, sir. Then that was in the phone call. And then he said, okay, I got this there, first sergeant. And, he hung up the phone. And within an hour, I was up there at the brigade headquarters, and then went to talk to Jeff. And then that's when the commander, we went on the carpet with the Tomahawk 6 at the time.
Interesting. So if I understood you correctly, Swifty, you spoke to the brigade CSM, which was 2 levels above you. And then independent of you, your NCOs went to the battalion and expressed concern as well. So that wasn't something that you guys coordinated. That was literally you guys reaching up to the NCO support chain and leadership. And that must have been a really strong signal to the leadership of the brigade that they had to make a real big change here. When you've got a whole group of senior NCOs who are stepping on the carpet saying, this has got to change. I'm sure that did I capture that correctly?
Correct. And some of the NCOs, junior NCOs said, they came to me, hey, first sergeant, if we go to war with this guy, he can get us killed. I'm like, wow, I mean, that's how concerned you were, And it's a job as a commander that, hey, your job is to bring everybody back. That's number one job. I mean, that's from my first combat deployment in the regular regiment. That's all my leaders, all my officers tell me my number one job is set you after success and get everybody back. And I strongly believe in that, and when an NCO come and tell me, hey, first time we go to war with this captain, I don't think, we can get a lot of people killed. That became a concern. Because like Joe said, the morale was low, was very low. I had to bring that up.
And the last straw for most of us NCOs, Swifty went on emergency leave when we came back from JRTC, if I remember correctly. And as soon as he went on emergency leave, this guy gave out like 35 Article 15s, a lot of them to the junior NCOs in the company. And that was the last straw for the NCOs at my level. We were like, you got to be kidding me. He waits till Swifty leaves to get this, because I think Sergeant Horner was the acting first sergeant at the time. And, like, what's he going to do? You know what I mean? And he just got promoted to E7. He's not trying to rock the boat. So
before we go to Rob, I just want to make sure that folks who are listening understand all this took place literally within days of you guys going wheels up and heading to Iraq, right? I mean, the risk assessment at this point is through the roof. And I can only imagine that just added another layer of stress for your soldiers, Swifty, as they're getting ready to go down and have this life-changing experience, to have to worry about that. So there was a lot riding on the new commander that was being brought in. So what did you guys hear about Rob? Because I know he was in the battalion, or Rob, were you in the brigade?
Like I said, there's only two people in the company that knew me. It was Sergeant Bridges and Sergeant Wheeler. And that was because Wheeler was my CO's RTO when I was a lieutenant. And I worked with Steve Bridges because he was a battalion ammo guy for a while before he got squad leader time. And so he and I had worked together for about 18 months. And those two were my only advocates. And things went the way that they went. I think I had the confidence of the commander because I worked for Colonel Round. So I worked for the brigade commander for about a year. I was his battle captain in the headquarters. Colonel James took a huge risk on me, just by saying like, hey man, like give this guy a shot. Now, what a lot of people didn't know is I was actually slated to take BCO, but I would have taken BCO in the middle of the tour had the previous commander not been removed. So they stuck with the command slate. I just arrived about 6 months earlier than I should have.
Yep.
And it truly is a very much a Bander's Brothers scenario, because like the NCOs, did what they did to Sobel. Like, and I can almost see it playing out like it did when they actually went into Colonel Sink's office and was like, hey man, this guy's got to go or we're all going to die. I think that's a very difficult prospect for anybody to think about. Like if you're in a small team, it's scary. But if you're in a bigger team where there's more people at risk, like a small team, like we can work around one person that's, not so great if he's not in charge. But if you're in a large organization like the size of the Stryker company, so we had 270 something folks in 20 vehicles, and that was with slices and attachments and all that other stuff. So you're looking around 200 people for a rifle infantry company and a lot of gear. If you can't handle, something as simple as, and like when I read through a lot of the Article 15s, back to Joe's point, like, it's like, I'm just going to throw these things away. They were stupid. Like, it was the dumbest thing in the world. Like, a kid forgot to tie down his yellow key at JRTC. Like, the thing's like $7. Who cares? At the end of the day, do a statement of charges, move on with your life, right? Like, it's not even worth it. You can do cash collection voucher and be done in a couple of hours and not waste the kid's time or money, particularly going into an operational deployment. The last thing that they need is like, if I make any kind of mistakes, and we lived this later on in other deployments, maybe not so much in the first one, but like later on when the ROE changed, I don't feel trusted. So guys weren't taking action. And like we were on that glide path for a very, very long time in BCO. And then, thank God for the NCOs, stepping up and making the comments that they did. For me, it was like, okay, well, I guess I'm taking command. There was no hesitation. It was like, okay, the boss is asking me to step up, so I'm going to step up. What else are you going to do? I mean, like that's every infantryman's dream. Like, hey man, you are going to command a rifle infantry company in combat. Who would balk at that?
Yep.
No one in their right mind that I know that I grew up with in the Army. Like if you like, oh sir, you know what? I don't think I want to take command right now. Like you might as well go and drop your refrad paperwork, get out of the Army, because that's just something that we don't do. I mean, it's impossible for me to even fathom somebody that wouldn't take that.
I mean, Rob and Swifty, you guys have sat through enough UCMJ proceedings to know how utterly ridiculous the idea of like all those like Article 15s is. Like if I was a battalion commander and I saw that crap come across my desk, there was a whole bunch of questions I would have for something like that. Anyway,
hold on one second. I got to put this in there. Like Rob doesn't mention it, but he gave the greatest speech ever the first time he ever walked in front of us. we're getting ready to go on leave. His speech is like 5 minutes long. He's like, "All right, man, I'm your new commander." He's like, "I don't want you to get in trouble. I want you to be safe. We're going to have a good time. I'm going down to beat up some people for the last time before we go to war. Please don't call me. I won't be there." We were like, we can work with this guy.
True. You know how the reputation precede you? Well, I didn't know that much about Rob, but Sergeant Bridges came and told me on Wheeler at the time. He was like, "Hey, First Sergeant, this our Captain Rob guy. He's a big MMA guy." I'm like, "Oh yes, fine. You know, somebody. You know, I got some. Oh yes." Because, you know, physical fitness PT, and I love, you know, in being a Ranger guy, we love rolling with each other, you know. My wife thinks that's gross, you know, but we just love it, you know. And that's what we do for spare time. And to get your anger out, we go out to the back by the tree and everyone's just rolling. That's normal. You know, and you walk there, what are these guys doing? Hey, that's Blackhawk Company right there. Yeah. That's how, you know, you deal with our temper, you know. So that was a good thing, you know. My first face-to-face with Captain Rob was more of the PT, you know. He said, just introducing now, and we discussed the big thing was the Article 15 stuff. And I told him, I said, "Hey, you know, I don't think, you know, this is not a good idea because of I need everybody, you know, everybody in that team, in that Blackhawk Company was important to me, important to us. And we need to go there with that kind of stuff, you know, on our shoulder, the burden of the Article 15, you know, doing with 30 and 30 while getting ready to deploy. We didn't need that. You know, we need them to be at their best, you know, mentally, you know, physically, you know." So that was the thing. And also, you know, Captain Rob discussed, say, hey, you know, he said, what, he asked me, "Hey, what can I do?" You know, I say, "Well, you know, you just support what we're supposed to do, you know, focus on, you know, our big five." Rob would know what the big five are, you know, marksmanship, physical training, medical training, small unit tactics, and mobility. And I got hit mobility big because, again, coming from a light foot guy behind the fence, mobility wasn't a thing. But after spending a year with these guys, with these Bradley guys, you know, people like Joe, I learned about mobility, you know, and that really helped me out, you know. So I said, "Hey, Captain Rob, support me on this," and he said, "Yes, it's work. Yeah, the big five, and that's what we focus on," you know. So that was kudos, you know. So yeah, that was our first face to face, and I still, you know, as I was senior, I still have to gauge him, feel him out, stuff like that. But the MMA thing and go out there, do combative to each other, get a circle, you get going after. People were doing that on their own. They'd rather say, instead of going to chow after the run, they'll get in a circle and they're just like, they're taking out each other. And I see, yes, yeah, Joe's sitting there laughing because his guys are the worst. You know, headquarters platooners are the worst. You know, they're always one to roll. And the Captain Rob right in the middle of the thing, just instigating it, like, "Yeah, let's go," you know.
Love it. Rob, what were your emotions after you sat down with Swifty and you talked about the company?
I knew that it was a loss of confidence, more so on the commander than it was on the NCOs. And I said as much to them. It's like, "Hey, look, man, like you guys had a crisis of confidence." And like anybody that deals with anyone, like when you see somebody lose their confidence, you know that it's going to end badly. You know, it's going to end badly for everyone. And it's not for any other reason than that person could be the most talented person in the world. But if they're not confident in what they're doing, it's a train wreck waiting to happen.
Yeah.
You know, I always like small unit tactics, and that was just because I grew up I was op 4 at JRTC, you know, so you run around in fire teams and group of 3, it's like me, my RTO, and my security guy when I was platoon leader. So that's how we built and maneuvered. And that was one of the things that I kind of bought to the company was like, "Hey man, like let's be a little bit unconventional, even though we're a conventional force," you know. And one of the things that we did that nobody else was doing, which was silly at the time, or people thought it was silly at the time, but it worked out great for us, is like, everybody in an air guard hatch had a tack light, right? We didn't drive with our lights on. And at first everybody was like, "Oh, you got to drive with your lights on. Like we're driving down the highway. Like people need to be able to see." It's like, I can see perfect. I got nods on. We've got driver driver visual enhancement devices that guys can see through their DVE. Why would we drive with our headlights on? And the number of times we saw people get shot, particularly early in the deployment, because they were driving with their lights on. And then, of course, they're treating it like they're at NTC or JRTC. So they're driving 25 miles an hour on a highway with their lights on. Like, when do you do that? When did you ever do that in training? Well, why would you do it now? And I can remember vividly one night being out with 3rd Platoon and going to stop at the power station because some MP platoon got freaking shot up because they were driving down the road 2 miles an hour, with their headlights on. And then when I asked the platoon leader, hey man, why are you even here? Well, my commander told me to come out here and do a presence patrol. And it was like, okay, well, let me explain something to you. Don't ever leave the wire without a task, purpose, and an end state. And that's the best advice that I can give you. Like, if you don't know what your tactical mission is, don't do it. And that's not being disrespectful or disloyal. It's understanding the situation because people can die. It was early enough in the war that it wasn't hitting the headlines as frequently as it did later. And so people were getting hurt on a daily basis. And a lot of it, and sad to say, was leadership failures. Like, hey, let's go out and check out the arches on the way to Talifar. Like, why? I don't need to go see that crap, And it's like, if you want to stop for a photo op, hey, whatever, man, you can say like I'm deployed. But the reality of it is we had a lot of people just get hurt farting around in the battle space that just shouldn't have been doing that at all.
Yeah. Interesting. So Joe, I want to now pivot back to you as the historian, as the guy who wrote everything down. So take us now to Samara and kind of set the stage for you guys getting to your first battle space and kind of what your mission was and kind of what was the state of what was going on in the company at the time.
So late November, we started packing things up. We had spent a month training down in Kuwait, and we started packing things up, and we convoyed. We got in large convoys, and we left Kuwait and drove all the way up to what would be FOB Pace Setter, run by 4th Infantry Division, just outside of Samara. Bunch of different chalks. It depends on where you were at. Some took 3 days, some took 4 days. I think one of the chalks took like 5 days. But somewhere around the 3rd, 4th, 5th, we all ended up on FOB Pace Setter, getting ready to conduct our first operation.
Okay. Swifty, what Joe and Rob described to me during episode 1 and 2 was it was basically a patrol base, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe I don't have my tactical. It was a very it was pretty rugged. Is that safe to say? What were the conditions like at the patrol base when you guys started doing operations in that very dangerous area?
Well, kudos to back then Captain Rob for picking up a company assembly area. We were in a landfill, a trash dump, a chicken coop. So remember, principle, you would take a place where it served no tactical purpose and easy to defend and serve no purpose to the enemy. So, hey, a chicken landfill with chicken coop and turd everywhere. Nobody's going to want that land. So, yeah. So kudos. So we stayed there for quite a while. Yeah. So it worked. Because we would sit there and, before we were on patrol, something like that, we would see Iraqis around us just looking over because we know about when we leave, they want to come and scavenge our stuff, right? So one of the funny thing, I think one of the guys said, hey, First Sergeant, when we left, I left some of the, I forgot what those LSA on the grease coming to two for our, Mark 19 and go. I forgot what that's called now, I've been a while, but it looked like a little toothpaste thing. And when we came back, I think one of the Iraqi kids picked it up. I thought it was like toothpaste or candy and must have put it in his mouth and he spit it out and threw up, so that was kind of funny. Yeah. But the conditions were rough, but being a grunt, as long as you got a place to put your my pillow, which I call my PMAS case. That is my pillow. That's the infantryman my pillow, the PMAS case. As long as you got a place to put your PMAS down, put your head down, you're good to go with my pillow. So it's that. But the Joe mentioned the convoy, that was the long drive. That was a little excitement, to drive that 200-300 miles to Samara to Pace Setter. And everybody has a Stryker, but unfortunately, as First Sergeant, I'm not assigned a tactical vehicle. I'm not a tactical leader, so I get a Humvee. And then prior to leaving, when we went to Camp Philadelphia or Camp New York, and we had to fill sandbag and put it on the floor. And I was ordered by hire to do that. Now, being explosive expert at the time, coming from the regiment, I said, sand, heat, combustion make glass. You put it on the floorboard, when explosion going underneath the Humvee is going to be shrapnel and glass cutting through me. So I didn't really like that idea. Plus, it weighs down a Humvee. So during the entire convoy, you'll see me, I think Michael Robinson was telling me, one of the platoon sergeant or squad leader at the time said, First sergeant, you're like a little hamster. You see a convoy or Stryker, and you see the little Humvee going in, out, in, out, in, out. Because I didn't want to be in one position because in case they're counting trucks and the fourth one is a Humvee, let's blow that one up. Because then of course, the IED brief we get, they scare us to death with the IED brief. So I was making sure. So during the 200 miles, I'm going just back and forth between Stryker, so like a little hamster trying to find a home, that's what. So yeah. And the condition, like I said, it was horrible. Even at pace set at the time, the war was still fresh. We had the leash pit, they put us in the tent. Force ID put us in the tent with no electricity, no space heater, just big old gravel pit, and so for a while. Then we went to Samara, did a couple of operations there. I'm sure Rob and Joe talk more about the operation there. But I remember when we came back, we finally got some electricity and and hot water. That was the biggest thing. We got to fight for the hot water, the hot shower. That was welcoming and good morale booster.
Joe and Rob talked a lot about during their discussion. Talked a lot about starting to now immediately when you entered into this battle space, starting to see the value of the Stryker in terms of its mobility. I kind of want to hear your thoughts of, because you guys are making history. It was the first time that a Stryker, brigade had been sent into combat. And so were you starting to see the benefits from an operational perspective of that new capability in terms of mobility, in terms of being able to move around and deliver infantrymen to their objective areas?
Oh, yes. Big time. Twofolds. Like when operating from our company base, we would go out at night and then just live. That's how we earned the name, the Ghost Soldier, because the brigade now is called Ghost Brigade because of that. They would know we were coming in. Fourth ID was, they had their sector in Samara. You can hear them. Even at night when we were rolling, our Stryker is so quiet. While we were rolling, we actually can hear their Bradleys and their Paladin up there in another sector of Samara. I mean, that's how loud those things are. So they know that we're coming. They actually didn't know we were coming. I mean, because we were so quiet. And so I saw the big two foes, and then we deploy it, right? We were mixing. And it's a platform. We didn't fight with it. That became, I see that firsthand, and that was a big deal. Hey, the training is paying off, Because a Bradley guy, they want to use the Stryker as a fighting vehicle, but no, we use it as a platform. We maneuver, we had a mounted section maneuver, and we have a dismounted, and both interfacing with each other. And integrating the digital battlefield. That was one of the biggest push for coming around. That digital battlefield was new to us, new to all of us, and seeing it at first hand with the Blue Force Tracker, FBCB2, whatever they call it, it was seeing that at work and was twofold. You didn't have to count that much on the radios anymore. You can do it digitally. Less talking on the radio, They're going to shoot, move, and communicate. We got to shoot and move first. Communicate's the last thing. But having that digital to fall back on or just send progress, that makes it easier. I mean, we can focus on the fighting, and I saw that firsthand. That twofold, that pays off.
Yeah, I mean, and for folks who maybe aren't familiar with infantry tactics and the way that the infantry operates, Swifty would have been the guy that's basically coordinating all the activities that make sure that the company can continue its mission, whether it's casualty evacuations, whether it's sustainment, but also in those cases where the commander needs you on the battlefield to oversee a key part of the operation. You had probably you and the executive officer probably had one of the most challenging jobs, because you basically had to be called upon to do pretty much anything that was needed to ensure that the company was successful. You saw the value of this technology. You saw in terms of enabling you to be able to do that, is what I hear you saying.
That's correct. Is that the brigade and the Stryker provide that tool for us to help us with the infantry thing. And I'm one of these first sergeant that among the senior NCO corps, there's some first sergeant out there, because we all have different style leadership. I was brought up with, you're the senior guy in that company. You're the most tactically sound guy. I should not be back there. Yes, capacity is very important thing, one thing, but I have my med team is, they're on par. I need to be there to just, to help the system in any way, because I can see a problem coming before a junior NCO sees them. Hey, I'm planning ahead for them to help them out to assist. Hey, get the stuff ready for them, pushing that stuff to them in case they need it. Because hey, they're about to do a coordinated search here. Hey, let's reposition some stuff, and the commander doing the same thing at the same time, So we have we had a good working relationship. Me and Captain Rob at the time. We knew what the soldiers needed at the time. He was doing commanding, and at the same time, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Paragraph 4, service and support. I was doing that big portion of service and support at the same time. But at the same time, being the most senior tactical experienced guy in the company, I was there. That, not to tell them what to do, but to be there to assist them and like that, make it easier for the decision making, especially when the bullets start flying.
We got so lucky because we had a commander and a first sergeant and an XO who were everywhere. So if there was somebody out there doing something, they were everywhere down there with them. There wasn't a time I've been in a lot of units later on down the road where you didn't see the first sergeant until you came back in the wire, or you didn't see the commander out on the objective, or you didn't see the XO unless you're in the motor pool. That wasn't the case with the 3 guys that we had. They were literally everywhere. Everywhere you went to, if you were on the ground, Captain Rob, First Sergeant Swift, Captain Tiffner, they were everywhere. And it made it validated everything you were doing, that these guys were out there with you every single day.
Yeah. Hey, Rob, just listening to, your senior NCOs talking, I mean, you can't put a figure on how valuable that is to you, particularly since, with Swifty coming out of regiment, having a lot of operational experience. That's just huge, man. And I know that you benefited immensely from that experience.
One of the other things that was unique about 123 was most of the commanders were light guys, and it was a mix of first sergeants that had grown up on Bradleys and then grown up in the regiment, or both, right? And so we had a great mix of mounted and dismounted leadership. And so it changed the perspective, as Swifty mentioned earlier, like, hey, look, it was a platform. It was a fighting platform that we get away from, right? Why? Because 85% of weapon systems on the battlefield are designed to kill armored vehicles. So why would I sit in the truck? And so we fought away from the trucks. We used them when we needed to, but it wasn't like it wasn't like a fighting vehicle. It was not that. It was a heavily armored LMTV. Get you to the objective, keep you fresh, and then hit the targets. And one of the things that a lot of people didn't see was the amount of coordination that we would do. And we were so coordinated as a company that we barely used the radio, right? I can remember getting chewed out by the battalion XO for not talking on the radio enough, right? Our company started using ops kids, right? So we would hit the target and literally you would get 6 radio calls and then we were back inside the wire. Battalion was like, what are you guys doing? It's like, sir, we got ops kids. And then battalion's like, Colonel James looks at the 3 and is like, well, why don't we have ops kids? And we got one of our rifle companies operating with ops kids. Why don't we have battalion ops kids? And so, of course, the XO and the 3 were all butthurt at me because the boss tasked them, but it made sense, right? And I had a rule as a company commander, like the company push is like a church or a library. Like nobody's talking on that net but me. Platoon push, hey, that could be chaos. Like there's supposed to be team leaders and squad leaders yelling back and forth. But when it comes to the O&I net, the fires net, and the company command net, those networks are supposed to be quiet because there's traffic that's important that needs to get across. And I don't need to be stepping on somebody else who's, jibber jabbering just to do that. And that was one of the things, although it's shoot, move, communicate, we were communicating all the time. And we were so rehearsed in our communication that when people would show up to do operations with us, it was a completely different feeling from anybody else in the brigade. And it showed. Like when we had the task force guys, and I know it was in the book, but when those guys would come in, it was like, hey man, look, check it out. Here's what we're going to do. This is your link up site. These are your, here's your number combination. This is the challenge and password. You're going to link up with the 3rd truck. They're going to have an IR chem light bundle coming out of the right side of the, of the air guard hatch. Pull up to that vehicle and that vehicle only. If you pull up to another vehicle, you're going to get shot. And we're going to tell you that right now because like, we don't know what your activities are. Now we would say that, and those guys knew that we weren't going to shoot them. We would probably challenge and pass or give them another identifiable way to mark who they were. But when those guys did operations on the other side of the river, they were getting shot at all the time by the other dudes in the other battalion because there was no discipline and there was no rehearsals. And one of the things that I did going back to the fighting leadership thing about team leaders is I pulled all the team leaders into every op order that we did. So when we did orders and BRAC briefs, the team leaders were there. Like, why? Because they're fighting leaders. They need to know. And as the year progressed, we also opened the door up and be like, hey, look, team leaders and one soldier, bring like one of your smart guys that's getting ready to go to the border, going to be, one of your smart kids, and bring them in there so they can observe the op order. And one of the things that I did And it's a problem that we still have in the Army today is commanders taking too much time writing the orders, right? Should be 7/8, 1/8, the commander writing the order, then I pitch it and then give it to the guys. So if I got an order from battalion, I would stay up all night and write the order until the next morning, pitch it at 08, go get breakfast, and then I'd crash for a couple of hours, and then we just continue planning. Not everybody was doing that. And so I wanted to give the soldiers the maximum amount of time to plan and rehearse. And every time we gave them that opportunity, they excelled. There was one objective where, we had a guy that had like a fractured orbital and his face was all jacked up. And literally he's walking down the street and McFadden goes, "Hey, there's the target right there." We grabbed the guy, didn't even have to breach. We just got in trucks and drove back. And those kind of things were happening all the time. And it wasn't because of any other reason than everybody was on their game. I would put it out, team leaders would disseminate, everybody knew what was going on, what the plan was, and we ran the company with a whiteboard, so there was no surprises. If you were breach one night, you were going to be, assault or outer court on the following night. So you knew what your pattern was. So your rehearsal priority was already baked in after the mission was over. If I was the assault platoon, I know that I'm going to be in the blocking positions next time. It made it easy for everyone to prepare for the next operation. On those rare occasions, and I say those rare occasions, more often than not, we would get dropped multiple targets in a night. And we were the only company probably in the brigade that would hit 2 to 3 simultaneous targets at the same time. And that's a testament to,
Amazing.
Everybody's like, "Oh, wow, like how are you able to manage all that stuff?" Because I got people in the right place. Because I could send the XO on an objective, I could send the first sergeant on an objective, and then I could put myself center sector and then manage the assets and prevent the chaos from happening or the friction of being injected into the situation.
That's really interesting, Rob. And in spite of everything that the company had been through up to this point, you guys hit the ground, and because you had a strong core of leaders and because you had well-trained soldiers, you guys were able to adapt quickly and start and really start taking it to the enemy like the Stryker Brigade was kind of marketed to do. I remember when you guys came in, because I was in Bala at the time. I remember when you guys came in, there was a lot of hype ahead of you guys coming into the area. And it sounds like, based upon what I read in Blackhawk Company, that you guys kind of changed the environment in a very positive way. Of course, war things happen, tragedies happen, and you guys experienced a loss early on. And I kind of wanted to have Joe kind of very briefly kind of talk about that. And I'm interested to hear, Rob and Swifty, kind of how you guys helped the company, get back on its feet again and overcome that. So go ahead, Joe.
On our very first mission, our very first combat patrol that we ever went on the 8th of December of 2003, we had a couple of vehicles that rolled over into a drainage canal, and we ended up losing 4 soldiers, but one of them was brought back. So Bridges and Wesley and Blickett staff, they didn't make it back, and in a lot of ways, it changed the trajectory of our company, of our deployment. It changed our mentality. It changed a lot of things within the soldiers of Blackhawk Company, because we had spent so long training together. We were such a tight-knit family that everyone felt the effect, even if you weren't in that platoon. And that's kind of they could talk about the steps of how they were able to help us right the ship, but down on the ground level, everyone was hurting.
Swifty, kind of want to hear kind of how what was going through your mind at the time and kind of what your approach was as you carried the company forward.
So the night of the accident, I believe I was rolling with the headquarters element. I was in the MIP at that time, and I heard the radio call about the rollover. So I was kind of working it, coming in and out. So I'm like, "Hey, what's going on?" And I heard that 2 Sergeant at times, Sergeant McLean Nelson said, "Hey, we got casualties and like that." So it hit me. But at the same time, we were still rolling into the mission. Hey, am I gonna just panic mode and stop what we're doing, and then let's roll there, let's focus on rescuing things? But Nelson at the time, McLean, and I think Dexo, that hey, they got the stuff handled. So that and then Captain Rob at the time with me and said, "Hey, we keep telling, hey, we got mission to do still. We still got to focus on the mission." But it was in the back of my mind. I think that was good because we kept mission focused. But I knew I had a capable hand back then at the casualty site where what the accident happened. And then, like I said, Joe covered it in the book and very much in detail. People boots on the ground there, and then we finally rolled back into the wire.
Mm-hmm.
And it was recovered. I think Wesley was the last person we would recover. And being a first sergeant commander, we had to go to Fourth ID casualty officer and identify a thing. And now I have a couple deaths in training and in combat, and there's one the heart, thing that sinks in me. I saw one of our soldiers, and it just Wesley, what hurt us, and Rob mentioned it, Joe mentioned in the, I don't know if Joe mentioned in the book or not. Just a week prior to that, his grandmother or grandfather passed away. One of his grandparents passed away, and he's one of these kids that was raised by his grandparents, right?
Yep.
And then and at the time we needed everybody, and he was a key guy he was the best driver in their platoon, and we needed him, and we came out to, hey, we need you like that, So, say, hey, but after this mission, we'll take care of it. And then to this day, I still live with that. Like, man, what if, we let him go? This wouldn't happen. He wouldn't be home, with his grandparent. He would be killed in action, in the accident, So it's one of those things that stick with me hard. And then I'm sitting there looking at Wesley body and identifying, and I'm sitting there, that grown man sitting there crying. I'm supposed to be a tough guy, so like that, and it's hard, that's I'm a human being, and so that hit me hard. And then the Army, and then this, and everybody here knows that our military has a way to deal with death. It's a double-edged sword. They pay respect, and then at the same time, boom, okay, we did the roll call. Okay, let's move on, continue, which is a good thing because we need to focus on the war. We pay respect to our dead and fallen. Okay, we put it in the back burner. We'll deal with it more later. Okay, but put it in the back burner, and that's the thing with the younger soldiers. Hard to do. I understand that. Senior NCOs and NCOs and senior officer, we can put in the back burner a little bit. That's what we got mission to focus on. As a younger guy, I understand that. That was my best friend. That's my roommate. So it was hard for the, so I have to sit there one-on-one with these soldiers, with Wesley's friends, his roommates, and his bunkmate, I sat down his platoon, it was their platoon, was a good platoon. And Nelson McLean, they had a good Corps and SEAL Corps. So I have to, sit there, give them the guidance and mission focus. I can tell them this thing happens. We got to deal with the loss, guys, But now let's do it for them. Don't have them die for nothing. That's why we and what we can do to prevent it. I think, so we came with some more SOP and developed with that. So that was a hard thing. And the roll call affects everybody. Unfortunately, the two biggest news that came back to the mainland, JBLM or the local area, local news was two big things. One, there was like a little rape incident that supposedly happened, but which then some girl made it up. Like, I got raped by, Tomahawk soldiers, something like that. So that made the news. That was the first thing about the Stryker brigade that came back stateside about this little rape thing. We're like, oh man, and I had to deal with that, before Samara, But at the time, I say, and then second thing was the accident. So they were like Joe mentioned in the book, that's not after a good start for a unit, rape, accusation of rape on our soldiers and the accident. I said, oh man, this is not looking good for the thing. But I said, as the war progressed, as we progressed, okay, things got better, and how to send the book, like you said, read the book.
Swifty's a good marketing man. One of the things that Joe mentioned in the book, and Rob, you and Swifty, feel free, and certainly Joe, one of the things he mentioned that really stuck with me was he defined it as a turning point for the company. And it could go one of two ways, right, for a unit. It could be something that can help propel the unit forward, or it can be something that tanks it. I mean, when you were going to bed, Rob, after you had completed the ceremony and you were thinking about operations, what was going through your mind as the commander in terms of, I've got to make sure that this company reacts in the right way?
It's all about maintaining focus, and I saw it later in my career too. And one of the things that we don't do a good job of talking about in military culture, like in all these veteran podcasts and everything else that we talk about, one of the things we don't do a good job at is like remembering that the people that got hurt or lost, they're somebody's brother, somebody's sister, somebody's mom, somebody's dad, cousin, brother, something. Like there is a familial tie to that person that is greater than that individual. When you really think about it and you talk to people that has lost somebody in a formation, immediately you'll figure out that that person, like, oh, he was my best man in my wedding, or, we went to spring break together and, had a great time, or whatever it is. And those stories don't often get told. And the reason why those stories don't often get told is because like there's survivor's guilt, for one, and then the other part of it is it's like reliving those moments, of tragedy. And so that's one of the things that I had to keep in mind. But the other part of it is it's like, hey, we are here to fight a war. And I think subconsciously, 23 years removed from this whole situation, I can tell you that I threw a lot of rocks in 3rd Platoon's rucksack. But that being said, they always rose to the occasion. So like if I stacked, if I racked and stacked the platoons, and I can say it now because we're far enough removed and we're all big boys and we can tell the truth here, 3rd Platoon was probably overall my best platoon of leaders and soldiers, complete. 2nd Platoon was probably my best leaders, second best leaders and soldiers, great platoon leader. Well, the new platoon leader that came in was good. The old platoon leader was trash, and that's why he ended up at freaking battalion staff, but we won't talk about that cat. And then 1st Platoon. And 1st Platoon always had a good platoon leader, had a not so great platoon sergeant, and the weapons sergeant was great. The weapons squad leader was tremendous, and that's what kept 1st Platoon afloat. But those dynamics also influenced the decisions that I made when we gave missions, right? So like, hey, look, we're going to do a hit with the freaking FBI or the task force dudes. I'm giving that the 3rd Platoon. Like, why? Because 3rd Platoon had my large population of regiment guys. So those dudes understood how those organizations worked. But the other piece of it was I knew I didn't have to worry about platoon sergeants doing what they needed to do or being on the objective or showing up on time or rehearsing. 1st Platoon proved me wrong on numerous occasions. Like, hey, man, sir, we're getting ready to go breach this dude's house. He's an IED maker. We don't want to use an explosive breach. Can we do a mechanical one? I was like, well, you better rehearse the shit out of it, right? And they did. And when they did the mechanical breach, guess what? They were prepared for the contingency of the guy running towards his AK-47 at the top of the steps. So all these things were the intangibles of what we were having throughout the course of the year. But again, like the hardest, everybody always says it, well, you got to get back up on the horse, and that briefs well. That's also scary. It's like combat can be one of two things. And it's one of the things, like statistically, when we analyze warfare, like if you simulate warfare, the two things that you cannot account for is the Rambo effect, which is just the one random soldier that's going to do the most wazoo thing in contact, or the guy that has crippling cowardice. Because those two things are so far outside the bell curve, they're hard to model. But then like everything else kind of falls underneath the bell curve. So you have like a marginally performing soldier still going to fall underneath the bell curve, but the guy that's crippledly that's cowering is just so outside of the norm that his values are zero, right? And then the kid that, does the Rambo effect is like at 110%. So you really can't model that because it will break the machine. And I will tell you that on more than one occasion, BCO kind of fell into that 110%. And that's why that's why the enemy had such a hard time pegging us, is because everyone was switched on. And I think part of it came from tragedy, but I think the other part of it was the training kicked in, and like, I just happened to be the guy that was pulling the switch. I think if anybody else would have been in that position and made similar decisions to me, it would have turned out just as well, and Joe's shaking his head no, but I would disagree. There's a former commanding general from the 82nd that there were a lot of comparisons made to between he and I's leadership style. And so I think if he would have had the same opportunity, I think Blackhawk 6 former, All-American 6 former would have done okay. But, that's few and far between. And like when you look at the legacy of BCO, all the former commanders, command sergeant majors, warrant officers, senior leaders, O's, NCOs that came from that company, and they're still on active duty. People that have just rubbed elbows with BCO are being successful. Like the 82nd Division commander is a Tomahawk, former 123 guy. He's in Charlie Company, so we won't hold that against him too much. But, he's the division sergeant major right now, right? So the DCSM, that legacy goes back 20 plus years. He was a private on that first deployment, and now he's one of the most prestigious units in the Army that he's there. And it comes from, the organizational leadership that we had, not just me, but, across the board.
Well, on that point, for over to Joe. So, obviously Swifty and Rob can't be everywhere, and they can't they're relying upon platoon sergeants, squad leaders to carry out, implement that very empowering kind of vision, right? And so what were you telling your soldiers as you guys were getting ready to go out the wire? like the next day or later that night? Like, how are you focusing your guys? How were you getting them to carry out kind of what the commander and first sergeant were?
It was difficult from twofold. One, as a new leader, I mean, I just got promoted as the company FSNCO like a week before that. I didn't internally know how to deal with this because I wasn't prepared at that level. So I just was trying to do whatever I thought was the best option possible, which is push the guys as much as we can and focus on the mission and shove every single thing down, every emotion, everything. We'll deal with that stuff later when we get back home. But right now, let's do what we need to do. And that's where it really was like, go back to the basics. PCIs, PCCs, making sure everybody's in the right place, making sure everybody's at the right spot, and doing exactly what you need to do first. Because if you do that, you're at least halfway successful.
Yeah, 100%. I saw Rob laughing. I gotta ask why, man. Why the reaction?
It makes me chuckle because like we were hardcore about not missing movement in BCO. Right. If you were in Blackhawk Company, if it said we are departing at 1928, damn it, wheels are turning and we are out the gate by 1928. And one night, speaking of 3rd Platoon, Battalion Sergeant Major came over and was like, hey, I'm going out with 3rd Platoon tonight. Okay, cool, Sergeant Major, whatever. You know, like there was no reservation with any of the senior leadership wanting to go out on a patrol with the team. Sergeant Major shows up, they're doing PCIs and PCCs. He doesn't have any water in his Camelback. So Sergeant Robinson goes, hey, Sergeant Major, like can't roll out unless you got 4 quarts of water. Sergeant Major went to go get water and LD hit. Boys were gone. I get a knock on my door and Sergeant Major's like, hey, sir, your guys left me. I was like, Sergeant Major, is that what happened? He's like, well, I didn't have enough water. I had to go back and get canteens. It's like, LD was 1930. I got 1932. I don't see a problem, you know? And Sergeant Major, you know, he laughed at it at first. You know, he was not happy that he got left behind. But at the end of the day, that planted a seed and they understood, like everybody thought we were the most undisciplined organization in the world. And it's kind of like there's other periods in my military career where people assume something because they're not inside the wire. You know what I mean? Like, oh, those guys are completely undisciplined because I think they're undisciplined. Well, you know, there's your opinion and then there's the truth. And the truth of it was we had a wired, tight organization. And everybody in the brigade knew if you got into a firefight and you needed to be recovered, your first call should be to Bravo Company 123, not to brigade, not to other people in your battalion. Call us. We will come get you.
Was that a source of pride for Swifty? Was that a source of pride for the company? This kind of like Blackhawk versus the world kind of mentality?
I think it was like versus the world is it's like the world perception was different from what we see from the inside. And I think Rob brought this out in Joe in the book that, you know, after the accident, when we go to chow hall, we walk around, you know, the story goes, you know, like, hey, you know, hey, this is what happened over there. Those people didn't know. They weren't there, you know. I didn't even say that. Yeah, I wasn't even there when what happened during the accident, you know. Yeah, it was our company, you know. But, you know, I mean, people seem like that is just the wrong image of us, you know. And the only way we can prove that was to, you know, go there and execute the mission and so like that. It wasn't us, you know, like us against the war, just their perception was not correct. And then we, as a unit, we had the responsibility, hey, that's, you know, just keep on what we're doing, you know. We don't have to change anything because, you know, we're tracking the right way. This stuff happened and, you know, we just got to keep on. We got a mission to do. What can we do to prevent from this happening again?
And the reputation, like Swifty had talked about too, this reputation started building. It wasn't just, it was the allegation, it was the rollover. And if you remember in Kuwait, there was also like the PX incident where someone had stole like thousands of dollars worth of stuff from the PX that we were going to shove in the Strykers apparently, but it all kept getting attributed to Blackhawk Company. And then every time something would happen, it's like Blackhawk Company, that's Blackhawk Company out. And that's where the Blackhawk crime family came from, was because the undisciplined nature of those guys out in combat, and they steal stuff. You can't trust Blackhawk Company around anything because they'll take it. And this reputation just went out of control.
That's very interesting. Swifty, I can only imagine the conversation you had with the battalion CSM after he got left. I'm sure that I'm sure he gave you a hard time about that.
Yeah, he did. And like at first, yeah, he was pissed, you know, but we sat there and laughed about it. Hey, LD is LD. And then, you know, we that's simple stuff. Meeting the time, you know, that's how we have you know, we do op orders like that, you know. command and signal. There's a time schedule. Let's say it's 5 minutes prior to objective. We got prep fire. You better, get there before or go after the prep fire. That's why we have timing, execution. That's how we have execution, mission execution checklist for.
Because we've already done the deep dive of the company in a previous episode with Joe. I want to move forward now. You guys are moved up to Mosul, and Joe, I want to talk about the firefight, the big 10-hour firefight, as I think as you described it was 10 hours. You described it as one of the largest firefights in the history of the Army in terms of length of time. Did I understand that correctly?
One of the largest company-sized engagements of the entire war in Iraq, where the whole entire company is engaged at one singular time.
Got it. Now that you've kind of set that, can you give us kind of a brief kind of rundown of the events of the day in terms of just major actions? Because I want to talk to First Sergeant and Rob a little bit about that experience. And I also want to end with you because you were right there where it happened, and what you have to say is extremely important. But can you kind of set the stage for us in terms of the big events of the day?
So we roll out. They had been looking for a unit to attack. So their whole premise was to draw us out there so they could attack us.
I'm so sorry, Joe. When you say they, are you talking about was it an Al Qaeda? Was it?
It was Al Qaeda. So it was Al Qaeda. It was Zarqawi himself had come up with this plan that they were going to crack the invincibility factor of the Strykers and prove once and for all that we could be damaged and we could be killed. So they had drawn up this battle plan in Talafar for about a month before this battle took place. They brought in foreign fighters. They brought in munitions. They were going to give everything they had. They even contacted the police chief in Mosul and basically told him, hey, we'll limit us to the western half of Mosul. You lock down the bridges and make sure nobody comes and helps these guys out. So there was a level of corruption that was going on there that a lot of people didn't know about as well. So basically what they were going to do was basically attack everything on the western side of Mosul, anything that was out. Didn't matter if it was civilians, shopkeepers, police, National Guard. It didn't matter to get us off of the fog because they knew who we were. They started attacking everything. There was little battles and everything that had gone on. And while this stuff was going down, they're laying in IEDs. They're putting their machine guns in elevated positions. They're getting their RPG teams ready. And as soon as first platoon went out there and MGS went out there, they started coming in contact. And that was probably about noon, 1 o'clock, between noon and 1 o'clock. I mean, we had seen some things all day long. We actually, I don't even know if I put this in the book or not. Cap Rob had pushed us up to the berm at one point. We were online, on the fence line, because we weren't sure if they were going to come and try to attack the fence. Yeah. So we're on the fence line. We had set the mortars up and we're ready to fight this thing out. And MGS comes in contact from the Pepsi plant, and first platoon shoots up to try to help them out to make sure they don't get lost. And in route, they hit an ambush right around the Yarmouth traffic circle. Both sides of the road explode. RPGs. It's pretty nasty. They fight their way through it. The first platoon leader, he needed a little help and a little chugging along to get through that. But he managed, and they made it up there. Rob sent out second platoon, and then me and Rob were following second platoon because a National Guard convoy had come in contact, got hit with an IED that blew off the tires of one of the big semi-trailer trucks, one that they used to move the Bradleys and the tanks with. And it was actually burning in the middle of the street by the telecom building, just south of the Yarmouth traffic circle. So second platoon goes out, and they hit an ambush going out trying to reinforce first platoon and MGS. That was worse than the first platoon one. They had a vehicle that was almost completely disabled. They had people that were injured. I think First Sergeant Swift was with second platoon. He watched, and I'll let him talk about that stuff. But second platoon, they had some minor casualties and they had some vehicle damage, and they're you know what he's talking about. They're still pushing through, and then my platoon and Rob were at the het site, and they were guard the hets at all costs, guard the hets. So we're stuck out there, and all hell breaks loose. And I mean, there's no visual reference. There's no visual reference that I've ever seen that does justice for what I saw that day. That's all I'll say. I've seen movies, I've read books. There's no visual reference I can give you for the things I actually saw with my own eyes that day. And just the volume of fire that was coming at us from everywhere. I mean, we were talking about a 360-degree linear battlefield of bullets flying at your direction. There's nothing that I can describe that will tell you that,
Joe,
at any kind of accuracy.
Joe, before I kick it over, because I'm going to shut up and let the three of you guys kind of walk us through like your emotions. We really want to focus in on emotions and pressure and uncertainty for the discussion. But before we do that, can you set a little context? How many enemy did Intel finally say like you guys were up against, and how many rounds were fired?
A little history on this. I did a deep dive into this because there is no reporting of that day about any American forces that were in the city at all. They basically said 12 Iraqis had gotten in contact and they were killed. They killed like 10 insurgents. And then when I did a lot of deeper diving in it, and I mean extensive research, read through detainee debriefs and stuff down the road, what I came up with was it was between 300 to 500 Al-Qaeda individuals mixed in with some locals on the ground who weren't Al-Qaeda but supporters of Al-Qaeda. So we're talking anywhere between 300 to 700 individuals in the city of Western Mosul that day against our company.
Against a company. Okay. All right. So Rob and Swifty, I'll really kind of turn it over to you guys to kind of talk to us a little bit about when these reports started coming in, kind of what you were thinking, what you did, what were some of the major decision points that you guys came to?
Yeah. So the first thing in the morning was, again, like Joe mentioned, MGS made contact early in the morning. And when that started stirring up, like typically what we had seen is we'd see like car bombs would go off, maybe sporadic small arms fire, and then it would just go silent. And then it was like, hey, go out there, check on it, do a BDA, see who got hurt, see if there's any, Iraqis involved, try and figure out what happened. And usually that, happens. A couple hours later, it's quiet. But then MGS was like, yeah, we're taking some pretty sustained contact. So we rolled out first platoon. And when first platoon rolled out, like it was hard to take their platoon leader seriously because he was kind of new and he was very, very excitable. So he's like screaming in the radio. Like if I had a decibel meter on it, it would have like peaked out several times. And so at that point, it was like, well, these guys are taking contact. Hey, let's move up to the berm, get inside a range so we can cover the guys with mortars up to the Yarmouth traffic circle if we had to shoot, right? And it's like, of course, we weren't going to go lethal if we couldn't, because like that was one of the limitations. And again, this is something that was not talked about in the early part of the war. We had no air support at all. You were lucky if you got a Kiowa, right? When I was a battalion XO, when I had access to the Air Force in support of my troopers, like we dropped a lot of bombs because it's like, hey, look, I'm giving you all the support that I didn't get when I was a company commander. And so and then some, right? So it was one of those things that had no air cover, really had no troops on the ground. And, because of the isolation on the western side of Mosul, like we really didn't know if anybody was going to come across the river and attack us or not, because all throughout the year along the Tigris, there was always stuff happening along the Tigris. Like there was an ODA safe house that was underneath the Mosul Hotel that got RPG'd like every other day when the ODA was in there, right? And so there was areas along the river where they would just pull up on the eastern side and shoot RPGs across and try and hit stuff. So we didn't know if it was going to come from there. And, so literally it was a piecemeal rollout of the company, because like what I didn't want to do is I didn't want to commit the whole force. That would just be dumb. Like I'm going to roll the whole guys into a freaking giant ambush. That's not smart. But I also didn't want to lose momentum, right? And so there was a point during the day where, I stopped counting at like 20, 25 RPGs being shot at us. And then, so there was a point, middle of the day, I just called up my MGS platoon leader and said, hey, look, Blackhawk 4-6, if a HE warhead comes out, put a HE warhead in it. You understand my guidance? Roger that. And then we started blasting toast. And when you have ATGM Strykers go black on ammo several times throughout the course of the day, that's a game changer, And we were shooting TOE-2 Bravos all over downtown Mosul, and it wasn't because there wasn't a purpose to it, or there was like it was a proportionate response. Like you're shooting RPG-7 at me, I'm going to hit you with a TOE. And that was one of the things that we tried to do. So it was also, escalation of force, like of the physical presence of the bodies of the soldiers that were in the city, but also mitigating risk by shooting what was required to neutralize the threat, but not going overboard, knowing full well that we had no air support. And more than likely, well, let's be honest, I wasn't going to ask battalion for help, because as talented as some of the other NCOs and officers were in the battalion, I just didn't trust them because they didn't do operations with us. And so I'm not gonna roll the dice in a sketchy situation and be like, hey, everybody come on out. Like, I need some help. Like, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna stick with the team that I got. It paid dividends. There's a funny story that happens with Second Platoon. Second Platoon actually took probably the blunt of the assault, like that day, right? So they lost a vehicle, and I'll let First Sergeant tell a story about Sergeant Horner. But the reality of it is like Second Platoon took a lot of the, like, the physical damage on the vehicles and everything else, and then Third Platoon ended up with personnel, and then of course Damon Armini got hit that day, and it wasn't a non-heroic action, and that's the thing. Like, there was so much going on that I can process data pretty fast as a commander, and I was still trying to catch up with the amount of stuff that was going on. But over to First Sergeant. It's funny now because we can laugh at it 20 years later, but in the moment it wasn't. But I'll pass it over to him to tell the Second Platoon story.
Okay, yeah, talk about Second Platoon. Yeah, like Joe mentioned that that First Platoon went through with MTS. They got themselves in a fight now. So and they got pushed away from those burning hits. Okay, and at the time, Cam Rob made the decision. Okay, Second Platoon, go ahead and push out from the berm. So I decided I'll hop out in the myth. Our medical bear decided to say, hey, I'm going to ride out with Second Platoon. So that's how me and Ben Tiffner and Captain Rob kind of fought. We there to help, to there, but not just over the show to provide them, what they need at the time. So I feel I need to roll out with them. That way I get a good battle assessment to the CO. That way Platoon Sergeant can worry about the fight, and I can do the assessment and send it back to the XO and the CO. Say, hey, what do we need, to help with the fight. So I was rolling out, coming up, and then I've seen on this burning vehicle, burning stuff, and then, I'm getting my Mogadishu flashback TTP again, because that's what they did in Mogadishu. They were burnt tires to show, that way the forces know, hey, who's coming, direction they're coming. That's what they do. They burn trash. Okay, QRF coming this way, so like that. So I'm like, hey, let's stay away from the smoke. And I think Captain Rob did that through the radio. Hey, that's not the fight there. Let's go get in the First Platoon. So that was I think good tactical move there, but thinking ahead and say, we don't want to get ambushed again. But going through the Yama traffic circle, heading north, I believe. Okay, we got ambushed from our direction at the time. And I was sitting right behind on a Stryker. I mean, some for your listener, don't know this. The squad leader was standing on the squad leader hatch. I was sitting right next to where the squad leader were standing. And Sergeant Horner, Platoon Sergeant at the time, was in the fourth Victor. Stuff was pinging and shooting. All that stuff was going on. He must have got hit, because his knee just came together, buckle, and he dropped right in front of me. And then the sunlight just happened to hit just right. And I see the carbon filament from the CDC helmet just floating in the air. And Sergeant Horner, face all white, his eye rolled back, and then I said, oh, he's a goner. So I went around the radio, because I think Captain Rob or Phil wanted to go, hey, get the status from the 7. I said, hey, 7 is now, he's a KIA. So I went up on the squad leader hatch and, engaging with the enemy. And another funny story about that, as that was happening, Kobe Buzzle, he was the gunner, brand new gunner. He's normally a driver, but he was a gunner in that time. And he was just shooting like crazy. It was 50 caliber. I didn't have my earplugs on at the time because I was, monitoring the command at the time. And every time he shot, and I would dig down, hey, Buzzle, let me know when you're going to shoot, man. I don't have no earplugs, so I'm just going deaf. 50 calibers going over my head, getting shot at RPGs. And it's just like in the movies. You've got these, the bad guys with their little 7.62 belt like Rambo across their chest and their black pajamas running on the roof with RPG and all that stuff, literally shooting at us, everything that moves, just like in the movies. They're like, oh my gosh, So like this is for real. And then we got out of the kill zone. Like I say, a lot of people took hits, but kudos to the Stryker. We were rolling with flat tires, damaged engine, but these vehicles somehow, General Dynamics Canada, I believe, whoever built it, did a good job in it because they kept rolling. They were supposed to do. It's a V10. Maybe we rode on a V6 at the time. I don't know, but we kept going, and we got to the kill zone. And I looked back, and Horner was still there. And he started moving. So I could slowly move his helmet, because in the helmet, in the CVC, you can see where the entry went in. and you can see where the 762 exploded on the other side. It was like just like, oh, I was gonna lift his helmet. I probably could see this big mesh. So I took off his CVC, and outside with his shiny chrome dome, sweaty, bald-headed guy. Not a bullet went through his head. What happened was he didn't snap his chin strap, and when the bullet first entered his CVC, it must have lifted up, and the bullet exited on the other side. So he just got concussion from that. That was it. He was a very lucky guy. So I looked at him and said, "Hey, Porter, are you okay?" He don't know where he is. Say, "What's your name?" "I'm Batman," or whatever he said. I forgot what he said. So I said, "Okay, you get to fight." And said, "Oh, Ronnie, first, I'm good to go." So I gave him some water, and he went back up to the top. And then every minute or so, he would start getting dizzy again. So I had to, keep changing it up. But I sent a radio back to Cam Rob and the XO and said, "Hey, Sam is alive. He's good to go." Just got his bell rang, and that's it. But yeah, I mean, that was to this day, I still see that sunlight coming through the squad leader hatch without the filament, and his eye rolled back. I thought he was a goner. There was no doubt in my mind he was a goner. But it was so funny when I lifted his helmet up, and it just like, oh man, like he just got knocked out, and I was so relieved, but he didn't know who he was at the time, like I said, "What's your name?" "Batman," or something. I don't know what he said. It was something that made me laugh. Like it's like Joe said, we got ambushed there, and then at that time, Cameron made a decision to roll out 3rd Platoon and the rest of the company because, I got a good assessment, the ambush, and he was thinking ahead and said, "Hey, I think the enemy's going to move back to, like Joe said in the book, they're going to go back to all the burning heads because somehow it's like Ranger TV, the smoke. Everybody wants to go there. So we know that we want to get there." So Cam Rao had a plan to deal with that, and we executed that plan. Unfortunately, we have to go through the ambush site again. So I had to turn around the 4-vehicle convoy, come through the ambush site again, and we finally got there to do a company assembly, defend an area, that block. And again, that's when I heard that the MGS and Armenian them was maneuvering, to put a Stryker in harm's way to protect another platoon. I saw that in person. I thought that was brave. And I saw Damien, the Stryker got hit. I mean, the ramp lower, I went in there, and Damien was in bad shape. Sergeant Gilmer, NBC NCO, again, this is where our training came in. The first aid training we did back in the States came in. He knew to apply pressure. He knew what to do, how to keep him calm and everything like that. I treated, buddy. I mean, that's NBC NCO. I mean, he knew what he was doing. Then finally, the medics got there. I remember holding in Armenia's internals, with a gauze, trying to hold it, and my hand trying to hold it. So was Sergeant Gilmer at the time. And I think that critical hour, that critical minute, I think that's what saved Armenia's life. I mean, the training kicked in. They weren't panicked and thing. And while it was going on, of course. And then, it was pretty memorable. I remember when that RPG hit that Stryker. Oh, there's a funny moment when we did arrive to reassemble with the company. The ramp lower, a counter guy from the rooftop threw a pipe bomb, and it landed right where we lowered the ramp. And the pipe bomb, it had a low order detonation. It just went pop like a toe popper. And then me and at the time the squad leader, Staff Sergeant Clymer, looked at it, and we looked at each other, and we were like, "Oh, that didn't go off too well." And Sergeant Clymer told me, "First Sergeant, he should have went to one of your demolition class because he didn't pay attention, how to make that pipe bomb because it just exploded like boom." We just sit there laughing. Again, everybody's shooting RPGs. We are laughing about a pipe bomb that was poorly made.
Amazing. Swifty, so you were a veteran of Mogadishu. You were with the Rangers. I think the bottom line is, I think when you were a Ranger in Mogadishu, you had a glimpse of the future of what the Army and what Blackhawk Company specifically would encounter. How important was that experience in Mogadishu to you as you were operating that day in terms of how you were leading your soldiers?
Well, we get something straight here because, again, myth always follow me, okay? Somehow, I was with 3rd Ranger Battalion at the time for Mogadishu, but I was with Charlie Company. Remember, the attack was on Black B Company, okay? B Company. So my TTP I'm learned from what I learned from, in theater, of course, later, but from the battle for Mogadishu. But again, the TTP, the stuff, and the way the street fighting was and how we prepared for the street fighting and a battle drill. And back at what Cam Rob mentioned about our train up, how we flow. We didn't have to, and Joe said in this book, we just knew what we had to do. The operator was simple, not simple. We had an obstacle, we had a plan, we had mixed execution checklist, we had battle drill, and that really helped us out. For example, in Mogadishu, what we did was we have battle drill. So during our fly out in the Blackhawk, we would get what battle drill we're going to use. Are we going to, let's say a vehicle, we're going to stop a vehicle. Are we going to execute the 2 Alpha drill, which is like a little bird in the front and then Blackhawk land here, there, and there, or 2 Charlie where different bird land. So we already knew. So all we do as a chalk leader, we get on the headset, okay, we're executing the 4. So I put on a dry erase wheel 4. That play on the helicopter, say, hey, here is the 4. We're doing battle drill 4. So we already knew it. So we have something similar to that here in Blackhawk Company as a Stryker. So we know battle drill, hey, we're going to cordon, and this is how we're going to do it. You get this block. We have to go in detail. This Stryker, no, he got this to cover this area. This Stryker, no, he got this area. That's not only for the line platoon, but also for headquarter platoon. Those guys really got a handful because they got MTS, mortar, fisters. So, but we all knew what everybody else's job is. That's what makes it a lot easier. Hey, we could execute this. Captain Rob's got to say, hey, I want first platoon to the northeast. That's all he's got to say. And, the PLs and platoon sergeant, they all knew what to do. And that's where the relationships come in. Yeah, that's with the stuff we learned in Mogadishu, the TTP there. So we, after the battle, went around the army, talk about the TTP, what we learned, and, the close quarter fight, And one of the things that we learned that it looks cool on TV in the movies, and we do a stack drill out on the street. That looks really cool. 4-man stack on. That's not safe on the street. You're getting shot at. Spread it out. Do basic infantry stuff. Shoot, move, spread it out. We can cover your buddy and cover each other. I think we brought that to the fight, and that helps out too. And you see all the time, but there. Because we drill so much in that 4-man stack on the CTB stuff, and that's great for room clearing, but not for street fighting. We have a TTP. We even tried a different TP in the Rangers, like we call it I don't want to say the dirty word in Florida. These little bugs that made each other, their butt stuck to each other in Florida, the lightning bugs, what are they called?
Love bugs. Love bugs.
I'm going to say, you finally got to bleep this out. We call it the bug drill. With 4 guys without a stick, pointing a different direction. And they say, that ain't going to work. That ain't going to work. And we're not going to do that. Just go with, the basic, you cover the front, left, right, So that's in the stuff, TTP that we learned that I was able to brought to the Stryker, the Stryker unit. So yeah, there was a very, very similar, the fight name like that, and how the QRF work, how one supported each other. And also during the fight, that's where the paragraph 4 come in. That's service support for me. That's the first sergeant. Is that ammo? I mean, ammo goes. You don't believe how fast 210 rounds go. But a lot. But Stryker, that's where the Stryker come in. We can carry a lot more ammo. We go back to the Stryker, get that ammo. And the XO, myself, was doing that. And again, we kept the higher. We hear him, but we don't push that to the platoon sergeant or the PL. We handled that as an XO, as the first sergeant, the commander. We kept them the higher way. That way they can focus on the fight. We supply ourselves, okay? Then eventually, Isaac Torres, which now I think is a division commander or somebody, came out and resupplied us later. But water was a big thing, and ammo was a big thing for me, okay? Because one funny thing that happened again, I was running around just after the fight kind of slowed down. You'd say that. I was running around to every platoon. Here I am with with a Coke in my hand, Pepsi. I was out of water, so I go on a Stryker. Sergeant Castro gave me a warm Pepsi here. So I got first sergeant a warm Pepsi, a warm Sprite. So I'm sitting there running around the battlefield with a warm Sprite in my hand, motor around, and getting shot at. And, knock on a Stryker, hey, what do you need? What do you need? They open the hats. First sergeant, you worry about getting shot? It's like, that's the last thing on mine. I want to make sure our soldiers got the bullets in the water. I think that was very important to me. And that's the sustained fight. That's where the Stryker shines. I think we do it digitally. I think the XO, Ben was doing that. And Captain Rob's giving the updates to the higher, let us doing the fight, and at the same time, putting us in position to where we can defend the thing. I think that's where the teamwork comes in, the battle drill. We knew what each other's job was supposed to be. We don't have to worry about that. So we can focus on our job, and that what helps out.
And one other thing I'll throw in, and again, for all you young freaking radio dogs out there, get yourself a Whiskey 4 cable. We were retransing our own company push, and that's why we could always talk. So we always had our company radios being retrans internally. So it was on Joe's truck. So Weber taught his guys how to fill the radio and turned their second stack of radios, which were supposed to be used for fires or aviation, but because we didn't have fires or aviation, we turned the FISV into the mobile retrans truck. So everywhere that I went, I had Joe in close proximity, and he was retransing the company network. So we could always talk. And everybody was like, well, we don't understand how you guys are on the western side of the river but the DCO for the brigade was like, yeah, I listened to your company push the entire time you were in the gunfight, and it was crystal clear over here. I don't know why I can hear your comms, but I can't hear the guys that are on the security at brigade on their company push, and they're within, a few hundred meters of us. And that was one of the things that like we focused in on all the things. Shoot, move, and communicate was a thing, but we maintained the communications piece at a level that no one else was doing. And that's organizational, man. Like, it doesn't matter if you're doing, if you're doing business work or if you're doing, college or professional football. If I can over communicate and tell people what I see, I can react to what I'm seeing. And that's one of the things that we were really advantaged. And, the other piece of it is having very, very tactically smart NCOs and XO. So like I had the two Bens as my XO. Ben Tiffner was great. He was our former scout platoon leader. And then, Iverson is in the dark side somewhere. So he left the infantry and went to do other things bigger and better in the Army. Both of these guys were very, very tactically sharp, different personality wise. But when it came to employing the tactics or supporting the soldiers on the ground, those guys were Johnny on the spot. And that was the thing that gave us the advantage, is because like you didn't have to, two things you never had to worry about. You didn't have to worry about me micromanaging any NCO in the company, because I wasn't going to do that. And if you had a question, just ask, right? Like, we had that environment because that was the pathway to success. If you hold too tightly, knowledge is power. Like, I get it. But like, if I hold too tightly to too much information, I'm become the single point of failure, right? And like, I don't want to do that. So we disseminated information as much as we could and as far down as we could, and that made our life easy, And everyone that encountered our unit, like, yeah, everybody like, battalion command. By the end of the year, the battalion command team hated the Blackhawk crime family moniker, because they're like, oh man, like we want to get rid of this thing. But the reality of it is like,
yeah,
we were the guys. Like, if you called us, like, we were coming to get you, and somebody was going to get hurt on the backside of it. Like, that's just the way that it was. Yeah. Because whistle to whistle, we took no shorts with the enemy. Like, if the enemy poked their nose up, we shot it off. Like, there was no negotiation, there was no discussion, and we were highly aggressive. And that even started at the beginning, going back to communication. One of the failings of a lot of the units that were in the early part of the war was the language that they used. Oh, we're going to do a cordon and knock, or we're going to go do a cordon and search. Like, no, man, it's a raid. I am going to an objective for a specific purpose, and then I'm leaving with a controlled exfil off that objective. Now, the difference between the way that the 101st did it was they called it a cordon and knock. I called it a cordon and search, or a raid. And the reason why it was a raid was because the difference was our breaching apparatus, right? Am I doing explosive breach? Am I knocking? Or am I shooting on the door with a shotgun? Like, that's what stratifies it. But as an infantryman, I'm not doing anything other than raids, recons, and ambushes. That's my job. That's what I'm supposed to do. So if I do anything outside of that, then I'm failing at my mission. And I did not want our guys to struggle with confidence with core competencies. And that was a huge part of the understanding of just like building this thing out and making sure that we were executing in lockstep, was making sure that like I wasn't changing any of the TTPs because the terrain was different, right? Like, hey, if we're doing an ambush, we're doing an ambush. Mm-hmm. There's going to be left side security, right side security, and assault element. Like, that shouldn't change. That's one of the benefits that we had, is just having people understand and be knowledgeable about those basic things. There's a reason why Ranger School does raids, recons, and ambushes, and it's been that way for almost 70 years. Like, why? Because it works on any terrain. So why would we change it? Kudos to all these people that come up with all these cool guy names and all that other stuff. But the reality of it is like, in grunt world, raids, recon, ambushes. That's it. That's all I do. If I'm doing anything outside of that, I'm not doing my mission. One of the things that I will tell you is, and this is the other secret of the company that not a lot of people realize. Not only were we, ferocious on the battlefield, and like we beat each other up, right? We fought all the time with each other, in a brotherly sort of way. And so that kept the edge going. But the other part of it was humor. Like, we did skits. Like, you can tell that First Sergeant Swift is a, hilarious human being, and like, he's cracking jokes in the middle of gunfights, and it literally, decompresses, even if it's just for a few seconds. when you're in the thick of something. And so that was one of the things that like one of the single greatest things. And Smith got us a TV with a VCR. I had one of my friends who was sending me the Chappelle Show on VHS. So we were watching the Chappelle Show basically in real time as it was coming, maybe 2 or 3 weeks afterwards, but we'd get a VHS tape once a month with, Comedy Central recorded television shows, and we get to watch commercials and we get to watch the Chappelle Show. And that, the Rick James skit of the Chappelle Show, like went through our company like wildfire. Like on the objectives, you got guys, I'm one of the baddest dudes on the planet. I'm one of the coolest dudes on the objective, like they're cracking jokes like the Dave Chappelle skit. And those small moments of levity, like save people's lives, like being able to laugh at yourself and laugh at a situation that like is ridiculous on the face. It allows you to decompress just enough where you're ready to re-engage and be back into the fight. And First Sergeant was great for that. He would always bring something humorous to the fight, but it was always with tactical and technical proficiency. And he was just as proficient as bringing a great joke in the moment when it was needed as he was as being like Johnny on the spot when it came to logistics as well. It was a perfect storm. Like we couldn't have had a better cast of characters, unless we scripted it ourselves.
I do want to talk a little bit about, because I want to be respectful of y'all's time. I do want to transition a little bit, something that I think that Joe, you and I didn't really get the opportunity to cover, and Rob, we didn't either. And that was, and having Swifty here, I think is great for this because we get the full team's view on it. And that is, you guys went through a lot. Not, before the deployment, in the very early stages of deployment, you saw a lot of combat. You came back home and you carry back those experiences with you. Can you talk to me a little bit about reintegrating the company, right? A lot of units really struggled with this. Units I was in really struggled with this in terms of soldiers who just went through a lot and then being expected to just like flip the switch and magically turn into like, normal citizens. Can you guys talk to me a little bit about like what some of the problems that the team faced as they came back home and reintegrated with their families and how as leaders we kind of
so I can remember I can recall one story, and senior kid, good guy, great machine gunner, like one of the best in the companies, got himself in trouble, got a DUI. And ended up in county lockup. And this was, maybe had to be within a month or two of us getting back. Like it was almost immediate. Like, guys go out, young people are going to do things that they're going to do. Like if you're under the age of 25, you're going to do dumb stuff, right? We know that. Like it's inherent. There's a reason why your insurance doesn't go down until you hit 25, right? Because you're going to do stupid crap. And he went out and got himself in trouble, ended up doing like 2 or 3 weeks in the county lockup. And there was a point as a commander that I probably could have pursued this dude, hit him with UCMJ and tossed him out of the Army. And I walked into the colonel's office and I was like, hey, sir, like, what's worse than county lockup? Let's leave him there, time served, and let him, let the court figure it out. Like, it didn't happen on post. Can we run this kid out on a yard arm? Probably so. Like DUI policy in the Army was the DUI policy in the Army. But at some point, commanders have discretion. And mine was like, hey, boss, like, let's leave him in county for a couple weeks. We'll process him out of jail, and then we'll see what happens. And the kid ended up, getting out of the Army as a sergeant first class. It probably curtailed him from reaching like a higher rank in the Army. But from a perspective of learning a hard lesson, like he learned the hard lesson. 45 days in county jail versus me taking 45 and 2 months base pay, like which one is going to be more damaging? A letter of reprimand? He's not going to learn anything from that. Like if somebody that's, got hit with a letter of reprimand, some people bounce back from it, some people don't. But for the most part, it's just a piece of paper that gets filed somewhere. 2 weeks in county, if that don't scare you straight, I don't know what will, And so those were some of the things that we had to deal with. And like, just, silly things like, hey man, don't go out and buy a car that you can't pay the insurance on. Like we had one guy that ended up, basically he was Uber before Uber was a thing. He spent so much money on getting it was like an Expedition, I think it was. And this is before like cars with 26-inch wheels were common in America. So this kid like basically spent all of his deployment cash on this car that he couldn't afford. And then he became like the unit bus driver, and he was shuttling people to and from Tacoma and Seattle to make money so he could pay for his vehicle. And that's one of those, it's like, okay, well, good initiative. You're not drinking and driving, but like that was really dumb for you to spend that kind of money. But I think those things were like opportunities for guys to act out, because like combat was hard. Like it was rough. And I'm going to say something that's going to hurt some people's feelings, but I'll say it because like, we're amongst friends. But the reality of it is the over awarding of combat awards to people that didn't deserve it truly has left a long legacy of just disrespectfulness to the guys that actually did it. Like if you're sitting around right now and you're shining your cab or your Master Infantry Ben's badge that you didn't earn, you're doing a disservice to all the people that got injured, wounded, or killed, knowing full well that like, oh, I got to get this award because I'll get free college for my kids or some other, BS. And like I saw it was bad in our unit. It was worse later on in operational deployments. And there's guys that like I stood next to that like I wouldn't piss on them if they were on fire because they pursued combat awards and put people at risk for no reason. There's a certain circle of hell for military leaders that did that. And I'll pause there because I don't want to go down that rabbit hole any further.
Yep. Swifty, I'm interested in hearing your perspective. Did the Army really at that early stage of the campaign have the resources to really support Blackhawk Company troops as they were coming back and they were processing
no.
their experiences?
I mean, start from the redeployment process. Remember, the war still pretty new and Army didn't really know what to do. So prior to the redeployment, remember Joe and Rob, we had to go fill the little survey, say, hey, did you, suffer a TBI or whatever, we had to fill this little stupid survey. And most of us, we didn't want to deal with that. We just say, no, because we just want to get home. So that didn't really help us out, The Army was just trying to help us with the transition back, but I don't think it did anything, because I know I lied on it. Hey, did this affect you? I say, no. Did you lose any sleep? No. I don't want to deal with it. I just want to get home. Like I said, I compartmentalize it, deal with it later. I just want to get home. And when we did get home, like I'll echo what Captain Rob said, and say, yeah, all those DUIs and all that stuff. Again, younger guys going to have trouble with that. And that's where, the NCO and the change command, Army's got to get better with that. How to deal with those young soldiers, how to control them, compartmentalize, In the regiment, it was easy. You just get RFS, relief for standard. You have a standard, there's no second thing, I mean, you in the car and the driver got a DUI, but you were in the car, guess what? Everybody in that car is going to get RFS because you're supposed to look out for your buddies, It's that kind of enforcement in the regiment. It was that strict, Again, some of the young soldier was hard, hard to deal with the loss of their friend, the stuff they saw. And to most civilian, when you come back, even my wife, because my wife, me and her, we military brats. We were raised in khaki diapers together, parents, dad fought, together, all that stuff. But we gone for 15, 16 months, whatever. To them, it's just like we went on the camping trip, they really can't relate to us, So that's why I say that's why the brotherhood comes in. Only people there can really relate. Yeah. And another big thing I had to deal with as returning is that the stop loss. Yeah. I think Joe mentioned this in his book. That was a hard thing for us, but that's where that training come in, a team leader course in the Corps. Now, those junior guys, they saw what's right look right. So all the new Corps soldiers coming in, we lost a lot of, senior NCO because they got promoted, move on to a bigger thing. We lost Joe, no big loss there. No, just kidding, Joe. No, so we lost a lot of guys, but the junior NCOs and the Spec 4, they saw what white looked like, and again, and the battalion, they kept, and then we developed a Stryker Academy, the model off our team leader course that we did in our battalion. So the Stryker Academy became a deal, and to this date, I think the Stryker Academy is still there. Because as a contractor, when I retired, I worked there and I deal with soldiers from the Stryker Academy that comes over, to our mission training center to train, as a leadership training. So I'm glad that, that the Army role with that, again, building that team leader, that fighting leader, absorb, he's a big sponge, show him the right way. And that made the transition, I don't say it's easy, but it set a standard, now the Spec 4 and now the young sergeant, now they're becoming squad leader and platoon sergeant. I still had that core with me, going on to the second tour, but, that's a different book, okay? Somebody else going to write about that, second tour. But again, the stop loss, big deal because we rolled with 120% strength, but then came back within a month, we were down to like 60% because Army needed, again, Army doing that brigade concept. They got to get everybody out of the OSUT and everything, go to the brigade that's deploying, So that's something that I have to deal with, And then we don't get those soldiers until maybe our rotation between, NTC and, the mission readiness exercise and then rolling there for the next rotation. So I had to deal with that as NCOs, But again, I had a good core, I had good junior NCOs and then now they became senior NCO. And like Cam Rob and Joe said, most of these guys that went on become division sergeant major, command sergeant major, colonel, division commander, I work with some great leaders, and I think that helps out. And again, I'm going to harp on this, that small unit leader, that team leader, that's my man right there. To this day, a lot of the job I loved was a team leader. So when I was a young sergeant, I went to the radio school, I came at the regiment, that's when they started sending me to all these schools, sending me to all the cool guy badge of school, but that didn't really matter. But they want, as an E5, you can absorb all that. They want to show what white looks like. And I think I brought that to the company, and I'm glad the battalion stuck with it, and that, and that's good. But again, stop loss hurt us a lot, it slowed the training, but again, second tour a little bit, to a little more casualties like that, but we had to deal with that. Yeah. That's enough story.
Yeah. One other point I would make too is, one of the things that we saw was the rise of the 4th Brigades too, right? So what we saw is when the Army said, hey, we're going to start building out these round out brigades for all these other units, right? Hey, we're setting up another, Cav squadron, or we're setting up another organization. And one of the things that really hurt a lot of the returning veterans too was, like, I went through this traumatic situation and built all this camaraderie. And then you got tagged to go be, hey, you're going to the round out brigade, or you're going to go fill this slot in another organization. And it's like, hey, that's cool and all, but when you take a guy and use Damon Armeni as a perfect example, like Armeni went from, working with us over to another unit after being wounded and recovering, and they sent him to another unit. Yeah, it was on post, but it wasn't the same kind of guys, and it wasn't that same long-term 2-year train up. And like the Army, you would think the Army would have learned from that, because that's why we had cohorts, early in the, in the 80s and 90s. Is like, hey, look, you grow with this team and you all go together. And that was very, very successful. And then we threw all that crap out the window because we had to keep operational readiness. And there were guys that were, hey, the line and block chart said the unit was there for 12 months or for a train and ready pool or whatnot, but the soldiers were not. Maybe the headquarters was, but the soldiers weren't. So you had guys that were like, and it's one of those things that's always frustrating because, like, and again, I'm going to get on my soapbox and I'm going to throw some of our special kids underneath the bus. Well, I've got 13 deployments. Well, that's cute. There were 90 days at a crack. Who gives a shit, right? There's E4s with freaking 58 months in combat, staff sergeants with multiple tours. Those guys had it much, much worse because of several reasons, right? One, because organizations were different. Maybe they were in a round out brigade. Oh, by the way, I'm not this highly trained special operator, with a whole bunch of dudes that are highly trained around me that are like, you volunteer 6 times to serve in the regiment, right? Volunteer to serve in the Army, volunteer to go through RIP, RASP, or whatever equivalent it is, volunteer to go to Ranger School, volunteer to go to jump school, volunteer to go to the regiment, and then I volunteer to serve in that organization. It's a 6-time volunteer. Whereas a kid that, like, hey, I'm from a small town in Iowa, want to join the Army, get, tasked to be an infantry guy. I show up. I don't have that same level of training, and maybe I don't have that same level of desire. Maybe I didn't want to be in the regiment, or I did, or whatnot. And then, oh, by the way, the standards are much, much different. If I have a poor leader in the regiment, that guy goes away very, very quickly, But if I have a poor leader in an infantry battalion, it takes 6 to 8 months for that guy to stack enough paper for us to get rid of him. And by then, like, if you look at all accounts, there's no way in hell that I should be sitting here talking to you as a successful company commander, taking the guide on 2 weeks before an operational deployment to Iraq. Like, you have a better chance of getting struck by lightning than being successful. That's not me. That's attributing to all the great people that I had around me that were able to lead in the absence of a good leader. But the reality of it is like, I'm not supposed to be sitting here as a success. Like, this is a recipe for disaster. This should be a cautionary, like, The book should be about like, wow, we got this company commander and boy, did he bone it up. That's the honest reality of what should have happened, because that story has played out in more than one occasion in other units in other places. But the benefit that I had was I walked into an organization that had trained with each other for 2 years. And I had 2 guys that were advocating for me. And like, if it, like I said, if it wasn't for Wheeler and Bridges, I may not have had any support in that organization. And then the only other thing that really kind of gave me some top cover was Colonel James going like, hey man, go do that Ranger thing, man. That's what you're here for. Go get that 100% and then some. And I was trusted to do that. It could have gone either way.
That's good, Rob, and thanks for giving me some good ammunition for my YouTube shorts to drive engagement. Anytime you talk shit about special forces guys, it's always good for engagement. So no, I'm just joking. I'll edit that out. No, I'm not going to edit that out. I'm actually going to put that in there because I know that's something you believe in, and
like 100%. Because what it is these guys are, like, hey, everybody wants to be a cool guy, right? But guess what? Like teaching BRM in Swahili, not very impressive. Let's be real. Everybody wanted to be effing Charlie detachment when the war kicked off, right? There's not everybody's a Sephardic team. And that's the problem. So you had guys that were trained to go teach freaking BRM in a freaking foreign language, wanting to go kick in doors with infantry battalions. That's not how this works. And they were so misaligned with their mission that they're even misaligned as veterans. That's why there's so much Shark Tank of those guys picking each other off, because everybody wants to be the cool guy, because they were trying to be the cool kid because their mission set changed in the middle of the war. And now you move to the future. These guys are cutting each other's throats on, YouTube streams because, hey, before I go character assassinate John Mark, make sure you realize that the merch store is open. I ain't got time for that, man. Like that is the biggest.
Yeah, I shouldn't laugh because it's true, and it's an epidemic. And it really is,
and it's a travesty to the people that you led. Right, you're dishonoring the regiment. So, like when I say the regiment in like the SF terms, right, you're dishonoring the regiment by talking like that. They don't think that they are, but 100% they are. For an outside observer looking in, it's like, wow, you're trashing your dudes. I have nothing but good things to say. I know soldiers from Blackhawk Company that are struggling today because they're going through some stuff right now, and we all know it. We know who they are, and we see them, and we engage with those guys, and they're pretty much hopeless. Everybody has reached out to them like, hey man, are you okay? Is there something that we can do for you? We got guys that will take you on a damn fishing trip for free. All you have to do is buy your plane ticket and go throw a line in the water and be with people that want to love on you because we served and chewed the same dirt. And the only reason why that's not happening is because they're choosing not to. And it's the same reason why the cutthroat community of veterans is happening, is because, like, rather than pulling that guy aside and be like, hey man, like, is that really what happened? And thank goodness for guys like Joe and for Swifty, because they're great storytellers. And because they're great storytellers, our story gets to be told in a way that is not only engaging, but it's also truthful. Like the amount of work that Joe did. And like, if I showed you the mountains of digital, like if we printed everything out, it would be 10,000 pages of research that he did to do this story justice. And the only people that didn't want their name in the books are the guys that were colossal F-ups. And everybody knows that they're colossal F-ups. So we all know their names. We don't have to put it in the book because everybody knows who he's talking about. Like, hey, it's Lieutenant Humpty France. Well, we all know who Humpty France
is. I'm gonna end tonight with I think an important question, and I'm really gonna start with Joe on this one. Our country is hurting right now. I think that regardless of where people sit, and this isn't a political podcast, there's a lot of division. There's a lot of internal fighting among the different communities within our country right now. It's really, really sad. And frankly, I think it's very dangerous. What can Blackhawk Company teach our hurting country about how a diverse group of people with different backgrounds can come together towards a noble mission and see it through? What can Blackhawk Company teach America? Joe?
Just about in anything in life, it all has to start with you. You have to take an internal reflection on where you stand and what you're going and what kind of message it goes to what Rob was talking about, how people put stuff out there on the YouTube and the podcast and stuff like that. You got to take an internal reflection upon yourself, and you got to make sure that whatever message you're putting out there is a positive message and a truthful message, because there's a huge problem that you see if you go to any VA, you'll meet every single Navy SEAL that's ever served in Vietnam. I mean, they're all there. A lot of people aren't truthful with the story, and that was one of the things that I wanted to get out to make sure that the is as truthful as I could possibly get it. So it's got to start there. The simple fact is you take care of yourself, but then you take care of your buddy to your left and you take care of your buddy to your right. If you take care of you and two people, your neighbors, I think that's how it starts. I think that it's got to start with you though, because the problem can't be everybody else, and then you're not the problem because you're always the problem.
Yeah, very wise. Swifty.
I think a couple of things. Embrace the changes. Okay, get out of your comfort zone. Some people got a mindset and say, "Oh, just because the other side think this way, because it's different doesn't mean it's wrong." Embrace the changes. Listen, because just like when I came to the Tomahawks, we got Bradley guys, death before dismount. I'm not going to learn how to shoot, but then they embrace the training as a dismount fighter. They embrace it. They accepted the changes. They say, "Hey, this ain't bad at all. Hey, the life fighter guy, they're pretty cool. So that kind of thing. Embrace the change. Get out of your comfort zone. Just because it's different, doesn't mean it's wrong. Just listen to the other side sometime. That's what I get from it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Two things, right? So the first thing is, I had a company commander tell me this when I was a young lieutenant. When something is not right, start at your desk and draw concentric circles. So that builds on to Joe's point, right? It's like, look, if there's something wrong in an organization, it's probably me. I didn't give the right guidance. I didn't communicate effectively. I didn't give enough time in the orders or execution process to be successful. And then the other part of it is logic versus emotion, right? Can I kill you with emotion? 100%. I can, and that means I'm not thinking through it. But there's this thing that all snipers have. It's called dope, right? It's data on previous engagements. So I can logically tell you where that bullet is going to go before I even pull the trigger, right? So if I use my head and I think about everything that I'm going to do or everything that I'm going to say and be calculated in what I do, the result is going to be more accurate than if I just pull the trigger. And that's a problem with our society. Too many people are willing just to pull the trigger both figuratively and emotionally rather than doing the calculation of saying, like, how precise do I need to be? I've worked with guys that before they open their mouths, they're sitting there and they're thinking about, what can be taken out of context? What am I trying to convey? And what is the unintended consequence of me opening my mouth? And most people don't live that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes back to what Joe said. It's personal accountability. So if I'm going to say this, like, yeah, I'm going to say some stuff, and will it piss people off? 100%. But you know what? I'm willing to take the flack because well, what do you know about leadership? I don't know, ODA guy. In my rifle company, I've led more people than you served in your entire battalion. As a platoon leader, I led more soldiers than you ever led in your entire time in special forces. That's not a dig on you. That's just a fact. Right? This is a fact of the reality. And guess what? Some of the guys that I led probably ended up on one of your ODA teams. And I was thinking about this the other day. I was listening to some of your other shows. And if you were to cast a net and you talk to people, you are 6 degrees separated from everybody that you've ever interviewed. I guarantee you we've all served with someone else that they've served with. 100%. I guarantee you. And the influence of the quality of the leadership, you can pull that thread in each one of these individuals that you interview. And it goes back to, probably with the exception of the Marines, you can do it with all your Army guys, 100%, I guarantee it. With your Marines, I guarantee you there is a common thread with all the Marines too, that have served with certain leaders of quality that they will cite that they've all served with in some way, shape, or form, whether it be by reputation or capacity. And that's the difference, right? The difference between guys being out there on an island, not being successful, or attacking each other in a public forum, that's because those guys never had quality leadership. And so they think that's leading. And it's not. Leadership is having that hard conversation like, hey, John Mark, you're screwing this up. Come talk to me. And it's not going to happen on the air. It's not going to happen. Those are conversations that I'm going to pull you to the side and we're going to have a heart to heart. And there might be some furniture moving. There might be some hurt feelings and gnashing of teeth. But at the end of the day, it's very, very much what First Sergeant and I did, right? We'd have the conversation behind closed doors, but when we came out into the open, we were on the same sheet of music. And if we got into an argument, the boys didn't know. If he disagreed with me, the soldiers didn't know. because we hashed it out and we had an adult conversation outside of public view. And that's our problem, is like everybody wants things to happen out in public, but when it starts playing out in public and it's like, wow, that looks really bad. And politically, the reason why there's so much division in this country is because, like, yeah, I'm leading with emotion rather than with logic. If I can put logic, if I can be logical about it, like, yeah, there are times where like everybody's going to be emotional, but guess what? If you say the first thing that pops into your head, you're probably going to say something that hurts somebody. So just be calculated and think about it before you open your mouth and shoot it off, because words are just as dangerous these days because people don't know how to process them. Like if we actually had logic, people would be like, that was provocative. Do I react because somebody said something provocative, or do I think about what they said before I take action? But that's a much longer podcast for a different time.
Yeah. Rob, that's a good topic. I think about what you just said, and I think about everything that I've learned today. A couple of things continue to pop up in all these conversations. Number one, first and foremost, it's brotherhood. Like that's our secret sauce for us staying on track with all the stuff that we've been through, that connection. And what I see with Blackhawk Company, you guys are texting each other. You guys are constantly talking. You're checking up on each other. That's what keeps us all on track. Because at the end of the day, there are very few people in the world who can conceptualize what you guys have been through. But you guys have that common experience, and you understand what one another has been through. And because of that, there's a credibility, right? And if it weren't for you guys doing that, who else is there to help people process what's going on day to day? I think that's like number one. Number two, there's no substitute just for leadership. Like, as I told Joe in one of our previous calls, as I look at the history of Blackhawk Company, first, all the individual aside, there was the deck was stacked against you guys in a major way, right? With some of the challenges with leadership, suffering a horrible loss very early on. But because of the leadership and the contributions of the three men that I'm speaking with today, you guys kept it together, and that 10-hour firefight that no one seems to know about, which I intend to reverse. I'm going to really start leaning into that because people need to know about it, right? You guys didn't have any KIAs that day because of your training. It's just, again, it's that brotherhood. So I want to take a real quick moment to publicly thank Joe Troutman. Joe, like the stuff that Swifty and Rob are talking about, like with veterans, tearing each other down and, to try to trend or try to make a buck, you represent everything that's good with our community in terms of trying to bring the truth and to bringing clarity. And I hope that what you're experiencing with your feedback from your teammates is you're helping them process their experience. But I think critically for people who study war to really understand like the reality, like this is not the Hollywood version. This is what freaking happened. And it's admirable, it's noble, and I can't thank you enough for your contribution to our community. But I know that your brothers in Blackhawk Company, thank you for what they've done for Blackhawk Company. You're a good man. Again, one final plug. If you are a platoon leader, an NCO, you need to read this book. This is a good professional development read because it gives you the straight scoop on what awaits you. God forbid you ever have to go into harm's way. So thank you, Joe. And I just want to thank three of you for taking way more time than I said it would take. Swifty, it's great to meet you. And I look forward to doing my small part to tell your story to the larger veteran community. I think it's an important one and a very noble contribution to our country. Thank you.